So you might be wondering what noise I make when I zap myself.
Oof!
Well, now you know. Nice. So let's talk about static grass. These two are from World War Scenics. They have tons of colors, a lot of cool stuff in different lengths. This is super long stuff that we'll deal with later. This is 2mm and 4mm. The other way to go is Woodland Scenery. They normally have a little bit shorter stuff, and sometimes I put them in onion powder containers. I've actually mixed these two different colors to give a little bit more variation and put it in an old onion powder container. So let's look at some of this stuff up close. This is the winter grass from World War Scenery, and as you can see, it's not a uniform color. There's lighter and darker and red and more blue greens, and it gives a really nice variation that's going to pop on your model, whether you're doing a full model or just some little tufts. So let's do a whole base. This is a 75mm base for a game called Kings of War that I also play, and I've got this dragon that I'm working on. I've drawn out where the feet are going to go, so I'm just not going to put static grass there so I can glue them on once the static grass is done. I've drawn out where I want the two different types of grass to be, and I'm just going to put on some Elmer's glue, and I'm going to paint through and make sure that I'm not going too far into the marked out areas that I want to have the other length and other color grass in. Now, if I go a little bit over, it doesn't really matter too much because I can always push it back or pull out some grass if need be, but I'm going to give this a nice even coat, and then I'm going to go to putting the grass on. So for actually applying this grass, I found the best way to do this is to get out a little tin that you might have left over from, I don't know, something you've got at some point in time. I do magnets on these, which makes it a little easier. And then this is my static grass applicator. I'll leave a link in the description there's just so many kinds and they're all basically the same. Now this is my mix that I'm doing here of 2mm grass of two different colors from Woodland Scenery. I've made one modification that I think gives me a better result, and that's to take a wire and solder it from the mesh to the charge point on the inside, and it kind of brings the charge point down a bit. So we're going to take the Alligator Clamp here and clamp it to this bottom plate. That'll give us a field between the bottom plate and the mesh that'll allow the grass to stand up on end. The other option is to take a nail or a pin and clip the Alligator Clamp to it, and then you can stick that in the glue, and the glue will kind of hold the charge and you'll get the same basic effect. I do feel like the metal plate on the bottom does a much better job, but either way will work. You can actually also make these static grass applicators from a bug zapper, believe it or not. I've done it before. If you really want me to go through that, I could totally do a video if enough people want it. I typically think that the ones you buy are just a little bit better. So when I'm done doing the first layer here, I'm just kind of brushing up the edges so the grass isn't sticking straight out. I like it to stick straight up from the edges of the base. So next up, I'm going to do grass on a dude who's already glued on the base. I don't feel like this gives as good of an effect. I think it's better if you have just the base and then glue the guy on afterward. But sometimes I glue the guy on first. And you can totally do the static grass. You're just not going to get as close with the mesh. And because of that, the static grass is not necessarily going to stand up as well as it would. And sometimes it's a bit difficult to get between the legs to stand up right. So I'm just going to hold this as close as I can without actually smacking the model. Kind of tap the side of it to get the grass out. I'm going to kind of alter the angle to get underneath the legs a little bit more there. But I think that's a good first coat. So again, I'm going to kind of press the sides, make sure the grass is standing up at the edges, make sure it looks good. I still have that little area in the front that I'm going to use the other grass for. And that brings us to grass tufts. I'm going to show you how I make grass tufts. Now, you can totally buy them at the store, and frankly, if you don't already have a static grass applicator, you should really probably just buy tufts. Now, I think it's an interesting process that I wanted to show people how to do, so I'm going to show you how I do it. Again, I'm using magnets to hold this paper down. It's just parchment paper or wax paper works just the same. This is just some white glue or PVA that I just have in a dropper bottle here, so I can just go through quickly, add a whole bunch of little dots. I'm going to do a bit bigger dots. You can really go as big or as small as you want, and they'll peel off as a whole layer, so you can have kind of bigger or smaller tufts depending on what you want to do. Now, when using the static grass applicator over these, it's kind of important to fill everything. Like where the glue is really important because that's where you're going to want all of your stuff to actually stick, but you really want to give a nice good coat on the whole thing because some of that other grass that's not in the glue will actually help the stuff in the glue stand up a little bit better. And there we have a bunch of little tufts. We'll get back to those when those dry. So we're back to the dragon's base. Now I need to put glue down on the areas that I want the other grass. Now the other grass is a different length and color than this first grass, which will give me an additional layer of grass, height of grass, and color. I really like to have at least 3 basing elements on all of my bases. So for these bases, I have 2 different colors of grass, as well as some rocks to kind of give some variation and texture and interest to the actual base itself. And there you have it. So you may be thinking, well, why do I need a static grass applicator? Well, you don't have to have one. It's definitely a little bit nicer, but here's what it looks like if you just went ahead and took a base, put some glue on it, and just pinched some grass on top. So if you sprinkle some on like this, I think this is the worst way to do it, honestly. You get way too much that's laying down. So it works especially if you want like trampled grass. You know, what effect you're going for is really going to be part of this whole process here. But the way I really like to do it is if I come in here, put some more glue on the other side here, and then we're going to take just a big old pile of grass and we're going to kind of poke this onto here. And this, I feel, gives a little bit more height just because enough grass is piled up to get you some that's actually sticking a little bit more straight up. So if you look here, I think the one here on the right is a little bit better than the one here on the left. We can add a little bit to that one and kind of fluff it up a little bit. You can always do multiple layers. There's actually specialized glue you can spray over this and make the grass even taller if you really wanted. So it's comparison time. These are the ones that I made using the static grass applicator. And let's put these next to the ones that I just kind of sprinkled on. And I think you can see here that the one with the static grass applicator has a little bit more height and it just looks a little bit fluffier. Now this is the 4mm grass. I think the 2mm grass, there's less of a difference between using the static grass applicator and not, but you have options. I mean, maybe you want to do it this way, maybe you just want to sprinkle it on. It's kind of up to you. On to the longer grass. I've already put some glue on the edge here, and I'm just going to clip it down so I have a nice flat surface. I have these metal hair clips that I use to hold these while the glue is drying. Now, time to cut this to length. Now, most people are thinking you're going to want to cut it this way. Don't do it that way. If you come in this way and come across at multiple passes, you're going to get a much more varied look, and it'll give you a much more natural looking grass that has a different variation of lengths instead of just a cut straight across. Kind of fluff it up a little bit and it looks pretty good. I use these in swamps a lot, but for now I'm just going to super glue it onto this base just so you can see what it looks like. Put a little dab of super glue there. Now the key here is to have your entire day free, so when you put the tuft of grass on it, you can just hold it for the rest of the day while super glue dries, because everyone knows if you glue your fingers, it glues instantly. If you're trying to glue something, it takes an hour. So I sped this part up for you because it took a while. And once it finally dries, you can let go of it. If I could reach the accelerant, I would have used it, but I couldn't. There we go. Nice bit of tall grass. If I was doing this on a real base, I'd probably put 3 to 5 on each base, but this is decent to let you see what it looks like. And here's what they look like, all ready for the table. Well, I hope you learned something in this video. If you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.